Hello, I'm Bob Henkels. I'm a CPA, have over 33 years of experience, sold real estate and worked on tax partnerships and things of that nature. Um, Welcome to the next installment of the Taxes and You real estate buying for personal and investment purposes. Today what we're going to talk about is what you need to look at when you're buying your own personal residence. By the way, for those of you that are in real estate investment, pay attention because this is the same that I will be talking about in another session for you. The most important thing that's allowed as a deduction in the on the tax returns for people are the real estate taxes. Okay, now this is very important. When you have a mortgage, if you don't put more than 20% down for the house, the bank will require an escrow account. Escrow account just simply means that they're going to take your money and put it aside in escrow to pay for, normally it's the real estate taxes and your homeowner's insurance. Because you see, the bank really owns your house. Yes, you are on the deed, but the bank has the right to foreclose on the house and take it anytime they want. So what they do is they will turn around and they will collect, let's say your mortgage payment is $800 a month. Your payment to the bank will be $900 a month or maybe $1,000 a month. And what they'll do is they'll take that difference, that $200 difference, and they will put it into a savings account for you. And what they do is they save that up, and when your homeowner's insurance comes due, they pay it out of the escrow. And when your real estate taxes come due, they pay it out of the escrow. One of the things that happens at settlements is you have to catch up on when the next payment is going to be due. So for example, if the taxes are $3,600, which is $300 a month, and you buy the house in say June, and the taxes are due in September, well, obviously you only have 2 months to come up with that $3,600. And so what they will do is they will turn around and they will increase your escrow a little bit. By the way, you don't have to pay the whole $3,600 because the other person paid it also. Okay? There's money from both of you to pay that $3,600. But the point is, you're going to have to put money in an escrow account at closing to pay those taxes in September. So, and those are not deductible. Some people can't understand that. But see, the problem is, even though you're paying the real estate taxes, you're paying them to the bank, not to the entity, to the local entity, to the taxing entity. Okay, of course, the best deduction is the mortgage interest. The mortgage interest is deductible. So whatever the interest rate is, by the way, the lower the interest rate, the cheaper everything is. It's very important. But mortgage is deductible. Now, if you have a 30-year mortgage, your first 4 or 5 years, 6 years, your interest deduction will be very high. But in the end of the mortgage, your interest deduction will be very low. Okay. In fact, I have numerous clients who are in the back half of their mortgages, and they don't even itemize anymore on their Schedule A because the real estate taxes are so low and their mortgage interest is so low that the standard deduction of over $11,000 is more than what they're paying. Again, as I stated earlier in the first presentation, most of the closing expenses are going to go into the basis of the house. All right, they're called closing costs because what happens is they happen at closing. The closing is where you close the deal and where you sign the forms and all the money is transferred. Okay. Now the closing costs in general are anywhere from 3 to 6%. The reason there's a range like that is because it depends on what the lender requires. By the way, if you're doing crazy mortgages where you're trying to borrow the money with a balloon payment in 5 years, and all that's reasonable to do. But if you're doing goofy things, then the closing costs will be higher because the banks then make more money up front than they do than if you put it out for over a 30-year period. The other thing too is every time a house is sold, we have a thing in most local entities called a transfer tax, which you actually pay a tax to the government to transfer the house from you to someone else. Now, it's normally split 50-50, and I think most of them that I've seen, it's mostly been 2%. So, in other words, you pay 1% of the price, they pay 1% of the price. So, if you had a $100,000 house, and now listen carefully, you have a $100,000 house, but you have an $80,000 mortgage, the transfer tax is paid on the sales price. So the transfer tax would be $1,000, not $800. It's very important to be aware of that because it'll increase your closing costs. Also, because of the escrow we talked about, if the closer you close to the end of the month, okay, the lower your escrow. There's also another thing called daily interest paid, and that is, if, for example, if I close on my house on January 2nd, okay, your first mortgage payment is normally not due until February 1st, okay? So what the bank will do is they will charge you the interest from January 2nd to February 1st up front, and that goes on your escrow account. That's one of the fees you have to pay for closing costs. So if you want to, by the way, the same thing for the real estate taxes and the homeowner's insurance. In other words, they will collect that money up front for the first month. So if your mortgage payment's $1,100 and you close on January 2nd, your closing costs for the escrow will probably be $400 or $500. If you close on January 28th, your closing costs for escrow will probably be about $100. In other words, you can adjust what your closing costs are by when you close. But be aware, by the way, some people like closing on January 2nd because then they have an entire month where they don't feel like they're making any payments because your first payment's not due until February 1. But in reality, it's part of the closing costs. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's okay, I'm borrowing that money from the bank. Okay, listen carefully. You do not want to borrow money from the bank to pay escrow accounts. You don't want that to be part of the mortgage, okay? And so you need to come up with the money for that yourself if it's at all possible. Now, again, I appreciate some people can't, but it's important to be aware that you don't want to borrow a short-term expense and amortize it over 30 years and pay whatever interest rate over 30 years. You'll more than triple the cost of what that expense was. We'll talk more about the closing costs when we get into the especially in rental real estate, okay? Also, buying a rental or investment property. If you're buying a rental or investment property, it's a little bit different in that real estate tax is paid or deductible, mortgage interest is paid as deductible. But on the second page of that HUD sheet, the settlement settlement costs, there are a lot of them that are deductible. You capitalize them and then you get to amortize them over a period of time. If you're purchasing the house for a rental reason, for an investment reason. And it's really important to be aware that because of that, it actually reduces the cost to you because you're going to save the taxes on that money. By the way, there's a couple of points to make here. If you have a rental investment property, the government has said that that is a passive investment. Now, if you were not born until after 1986, that's all we've ever had. But when I had done all those real estate tax partnerships, there were no passive rules. And so we were able to generate these huge losses and flow them through to the taxpayers. In 1986, they changed that law so that if you're passive, you're not allowed to take losses. Well, the same thing is true now because the law passed in 1986. And so you have to be very careful that the whole thing is arranged so that you can take the losses and you're not, but you are passive. There's no way around it with real estate. So some people say, oh, I'm going to buy a house and I'm going to be able to generate losses and it'll reduce my income. Be very careful because, again, it is considered passive and you might not be able to take it. The good news is, if and when you sell the rental property, all those losses that have been suspended, so to speak, you will be allowed to use them to offset the gain from the property. So the main thing, too, is this. For a rental property, if and when you sell it, and you will, when you sell it, the gains are taxed as not as ordinary gains, but as capital gains. It's called Section 1250 unrecaptured, which are taxed at 25%. And that's the beauty of it. Just a quick brief aside. When we used to do the tax shelters, and we talked to people about tax shelters, okay, there's certain types of income and expenses. We have ordinary income and ordinary expenses. A W-2 is an example of an ordinary income. Let's see, newspapers and things for people who work in a business or business cars, those are examples of business expenses, things that are tied into ordinary income. On the other side, we have capital gains, which is normally the buying and selling of investments. It could be stocks and bonds and all those things, but it can also be real estate. Okay? And from real estate you get, or from investments, you get what's called capital gains. Ordinary income is taxed at the highest rate possible. Capital gains are usually taxed at the lowest rate possible. Why? Well, because when people invest their money, there's risk involved, and the stock market could go bad. The housing market could blow up and you would lose your money. So that's why they allow the difference there. And there's another catch. With capital losses, you're only allowed a $3,000 loss. Now, here's the good news. A rental property is not considered investment, and so you're allowed to deduct the entire loss in the year of sale. So it's really a good thing in some ways. By the way, you don't want losses, but my point is you at least are able to take them. Okay? Okay, so now let's talk about homes. Okay, let's talk about homes and how you're going to find your house. There's a standing joke going around. What are the three most important things in real estate? If you ask an insurance agent this question, they will give you the correct answer. It's location, location, location. That's really what it's all about in real estate. If you buy a house in a ghetto, it will never appreciate in value, and your life will be in danger constantly. So when you purchase something, you want it to be in a relatively safe area, as I'm sure you're all aware of. But the point is, location is everything. Okay? And here's the reason. No matter what house you buy, and if you're watching this presentation, you're probably thinking about buying your first house, or maybe your second. But no matter what you buy, you're going to have to sell that house. At some point in time, you're going to have to sell it. And so I make these suggestions for you in the hope that you can use them. And I appreciate that if what I say is too, might be too expensive or too difficult, fine, settle for something smaller. But the bottom line is, this is what you really need to sell a house. Number one, you should have 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Now, why? Well, you always want a master bedroom, and even if it's just the same size as all the other bedrooms, you still have a master bedroom. Then you have what I call the kid bedroom, and then you just have an extra bedroom for whatever reason. For some people, it's to have more children. For other people, it's to set up an office in their home. For other people, it's to set up a den. For other people, it's to set up a TV room. For other people, it's to set up a sewing room. It really doesn't matter. But if you have 3 bedrooms, it really allows people to be more flexible and be able to buy your house. Secondly, you need to have 2 bathrooms. Now, most master bathrooms in nowadays homes have a bathroom attached to them, but in some of the older homes, they don't. You should always have at least 2 bathrooms. The next thing is you want to be in a reasonably nice neighborhood. Okay, I will never forget, my wife and I, when we bought our first home, we went to look at this home. We told the real estate agent, well, this is the most we can afford. Oh, and I'll get to that in a little while too, or in fact, it's not in the materials. I have to warn you, when you tell a real estate agent this is how much you can afford, okay, they will show you houses up here. I've never understood that. They will never show you houses that are here. Never. It's like they always figure you're stupid and you have no idea what you're doing. Okay? The point is, I asked for a house at this level. They showed me like 5 houses there. And I said, this is the level I have to buy the house at. I've done my calculations. So the lady took me to a ton of slums. I think she was trying to make a point. If that's where you want to go, that's what you want to pay. This is where you're going to live. Okay, it was just a terrible neighborhood. I'll never forget it. I'll just call it Avenue Estates. Okay, and I just remember thinking, my God, I couldn't imagine taking my family here. Okay, now what I want to tell you is I fired that real estate agent because I really felt that she was doing this on purpose. I got a new real estate agent. Remember, I'm buying my house. And I turned around and they showed me some. Remember, I wanted here and she was showing up here. And this guy was much more reasonable. He said, well, if you want to pay here, we can look here and then offer this, or, down here and then negotiate up. And I said, okay, that works. So we ended up finding this really nice house in this really pretty neighborhood right next to a school. It was just really beautiful. We were so happy. We go to closing. We bought the house. Everything was great. And then it turns out, remember that Avenue Estates? It was 6 blocks away, 6 blocks south of my house. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Now, to be perfectly honest, never saw any of that people, never saw any of those issues. It was just amazing. But again, you have to have a nice neighborhood because you see, again, you're going to sell the house. Plus, you want the safety for your family. Okay. The other thing too is you want to have really good schools. There was one place where I moved where my wife and I looked at all the different things, and we basically said we actually went and talked to the principals and the I'm trying to think, and some of the teachers at the schools that we're thinking our kids might go to. In fact, there was one time where we actually talked to all the principals of all the elementary schools, and then we bought a house in a neighborhood that was near the best elementary school. Now, the problem was we knew that when they got to the middle school, they would all go to the same place, but we thought, well, that's okay. At least the kids will have a good foundation, okay? Again, you have to have good schools. By the way, if you don't have good schools, you'll still be able to sell your house, but it's not going to appreciate in value. And we'll talk more about appreciation a little later. The next thing is that it's really good to be in a county or a town that has good services. And I'm talking about police, fire, utilities, things of that nature. It's very important to try to have a town that has good services. I remember back in high school, I was at a boarding school in Wisconsin. Never forget this. And we had an administration building that was 6 stories tall. It was one of the largest buildings in this town in Wisconsin. And someone was smoking in the attic and it caught on fire. And the police, the fire truck showed up, okay? And they stood with all the rest of us and watched the building burn down to the 4th floor because that's all the higher their pumps would work. I've never forgotten that total feeling of helplessness as you watch the top 2 stories of a building burn down so that their hoses would work. By the way, and all they did was hose the other buildings because they knew there was no way they were going to stop the fire after they had to let two floors burn down. Again, you need to be aware of those kinds of things because again, obviously you're not going to have that happen with your house. But I mean, there are some towns that are distressed and they don't even have local police. There was a town like I live by a major city right now, and if you go 45 miles outside of the town, there are towns that have no police force. Okay, now the real estate taxes should be lower because you're not paying for any police force. But the point is that you also don't have any protection. Okay, the next thing. And by the way, a quick aside, the better the schools, the better the police department, the better the fire department, the better the community services, okay, the higher your real estate taxes. So you might say, well, we don't have any kids, or our kids are grown and we don't care, we're just moving to a town with crummy services. And that's your decision, it's perfectly fine. But The point I'm trying to make is if you want to resell that house, it will change the people that can look at your house and purchase your house. Okay. Remember also that if you want to buy an older home, and there's a lot of beautiful older homes, but be aware that a lot of them would need, there's more repairs and maintenance. Some of them don't have air conditioning. I mean, there's a lot of issues that you have to walk through if you're going to buy an older house. I mean, in the area we live now, there are just so many beautiful older homes in some of the older neighborhoods around the city. It's absolutely stunning. And in fact, a lot of yuppies are moving back into the neighborhoods where the parents had left 25, 30 years ago to get them away from the city. They're actually moving back in and taking these old homes and adding central air and all that stuff. And because it's a dream, wraparound porches, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. But the point is that if you have an older home, it's probably going to cost more. Also, if you get out into some of the suburbs, like the home I live in right now, I think it was built in 1948. Okay, it's a nice house, a very nice brick house. It's wonderful. I have no issues with it. Okay, but the point is that I do have some repairs because things are just old and it happens. And so be aware that you're going to have to do that. By the way, the reason you need to know all this is you have to budget for this so that once you purchase the house, you're able to do things there and to make sure that everything works perfectly. The other thing that you want to find out, and again, this is totally overlooked by almost everyone, you need to find out how the town appraises their property. For example, go back to my $100,000 house. In some states, in some counties, what they do is they take the $100,000 house and they say, okay, we're going to appraise that at 50% of value. So in that town, a $100,000 house would be appraised at $50,000. Okay, and then they take the millage, and a millage is a 0.1%. A millage, and they calculate the tax based upon that $50,000. Now, listen to what I'm going to tell you. If you have a $100,000 house and you have a $50,000 millage or $50,000 value, what they're going to do is, let's say, just charge you 10 mils. So you're going to pay $5,000 for real estate taxes. Okay? Now, follow this. In another city, they're going to use 100% of fair value, which means it's going to be $100,000 as the market value. Do you want to guess what the millage is? 0.5 mils, which means that the taxes will be $5,000. It doesn't really matter how they value them. They just increase and raise the millage to get more taxes or to get the amount of taxes they want. The town I'm living in now, the politicians promised that they would never raise taxes. Never. We would never raise taxes. But what they did was they went out and they had every home reappraised. So what happened was they took a house that was purchased for $100,000 5 years ago, and they said it's now worth $200,000. Okay, well, what just happened? Well, notice they didn't raise taxes, did they? All they did was they raised the appraisal times the millage, which will double their income, the taxes that they're able to collect. So again, you have to find out how that's appraised. Now, and here's why. Once you find out how it's appraised, and most towns do appraise the properties, this will give you a ballpark for what the house is worth according to the county. By the way, be aware that the counties and the locals are usually higher than normal. They're normally higher than normal. Why? Because that's how they increase their millage, okay? I'm sorry, they increase their taxes, the real estate taxes that they receive. The key here is to work hard to get a feel for what the house is worth before you even talk to some of these other people. And what's nice now is, at least where I live, and I'm assuming it's every place now, or most places, you can actually go online to the county real estate department and you can look up the taxes for anything, okay, for like any location. And you can find out what the taxes are, and you can back into the value if you know the appraisal and the millage, okay? And that's really not that difficult. The other thing, too, that you want to find out is, what are the future plans of the town? I can't tell you how important this is, and people don't even ask about this. Are they going to put an airport in next to you? Are they going to put in sidewalks? By the way, my father always told me, when you buy a property, you never want a corner house. You know, the house on the corner of a street? You never want a corner house. By the way, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just passing it on. But by the way, it is true because this happened to some of our friends. They lived in a corner house. What happened when they put in sidewalks for the first time? They had to put in sidewalks on two sides, and so the fee that they had to pay was twice as much as everybody else. By the way, the other thing too about corner houses is that they're much more dangerous for people driving around and things. You have to be, it can be terribly, terribly dangerous. Okay? I can't tell you how many places in where I live where people who live on corner houses have put small boulders on the corner of their property to keep people from cutting the corner. So again, be aware of that. Also, they're going to widen the streets. Also, are there any planned tax increases? Where I'm living right now, they're talking about increasing taxes once again. Also, the future plans of the county, all those same things. Are there going to be any widening or whatever? All right. In the next presentation, we'll talk about some of the other issues still about the house, about the personal home. Again, remember, for those in real estate and investment, these issues are the same. You want to know the same things about the airport and all the things and the appraisal and all that, because it's going to impact what the rent is that you're going to charge the people. See you soon.
BPTV. Come volunteer. If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't be here.
BPTV. Come on in, make a show. It's still fun after all these years.